So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody that can't join us today. Welcome to the PLOS Water Editorial Board. We are very, very happy that you've chosen to join us. What we're going to do today is just run through a quick presentation on some resources that may be helpful to you and things that might help define your role more and give you some more information. I believe a lot of this information you will have received in your onboarding, your welcome pack that you received, but there's a lot of links that we'll be toggling out of here, so you can use this presentation to also refresh your memory. So, agenda today is we're just going to introduce ourselves, give a brief introduction, and then we're going to dive into the PLOS Water Academic Editor Role 101, which should take about 30 minutes. As I said, there might seem like a lot of information here, but you should have received all this information in your welcome pack. So please don't worry or feel a bit overwhelmed by it all. So my name is Jackie Salmons. I actually work as an editorial research associate in R&R, which is research and recruitment. Our team covers a lot of different roles. We get involved in recruitment across all PLOS journals. We also manage our current editorial boards. We provide resources. We train new academic editors. We also get involved in helping to move manuscripts along the pipeline. So we tend to get involved in anything and everything that requires assistance. And I'll pass over to Deborah to introduce herself.
Yeah, my name is Deborah Walker, and I'm the executive editor of PLOS Water. So I have editorial oversight over the journal, and I work with our editors-in-chief, Jenna Davis and Pierre Horvitz, who's not here today, to implement our vision for the journal and manage the journal. And I'll hand it over to Jenna.
Thanks very much. I'm Jenna Davis. I'm on faculty at Stanford University in California. And as Deborah mentioned, one of two editors-in-chief working with Pierre Horowitz from Edith Cowan University in Perth, Australia. And as inaugural EICs in particular, I think our mission is to really think about an inclusive and ambitious vision for PLOS Water, and then work with this great team to bring it to life.
Thank you, Jenna. Deborah, I'm going to pass back to you to introduce PLOS Water.
Yes, so this sort of takes us to PLOS Water. What is PLOS Water and why did we launch PLOS Water? So PLOS really saw a need for an open access journal in water research that really brings together all these separate subject areas that focus around the common theme of water, because historically there's been a bit of a publishing divide, for example, between water resources and environmental impacts versus the WASH field, for example. And our mission and scope is really focused around, well, one, we really aim for an equitable and inclusive journal that represents the research field globally, and not just sort of that can be a home for researchers from everywhere, but also academic researchers as well as non-academics, and all stakeholders really involved in this common theme of fresh water. Central to PLOS's mission really is open access and open science. And so we believe that all published research should be available to everybody, and we strive to make open access publishing as accessible as possible to everybody, regardless of their funding backgrounds. Yeah, and then lastly, as I've sort of already mentioned, this broad scope where we really hope to bring together research on water and sanitation, on water resources, pollution, security, environmental impact policy, as well as the social sciences, to all of everything that focuses on water as a vital resource for humans and the planet. So our global equity publishing model is our funding model that is specifically designed to foster inclusive global participation in open access publishing. So this, first of all, what this does is it allows researchers from low-income countries, specifically researchers from Research for Life countries, to publish for free with us. And for researchers not in Research for Life countries, it shifts the financial burden of open access publishers from the researcher to the institutions. So institutions can pay a flat annual fee to enable all their affiliated researchers to publish for free in the journal. And the fee that the institutions pay depends on the historic research output in the field, as well as their regional economies. So that is their World Bank lending tiers. Yeah, and this is it about PLOS Water and our publishing model, and I'll hand it back to Jackie.
Thanks, Deborah. So the PLOS Water editorial board, we make it a priority to develop an editorial board that is diverse in geography, gender, and research area. We have different types of editorial members. You've met Deborah, executive editor, and our editor, one of our editors-in-chief, Jenna. We also have section editors who advise on subject-specific issues and manuscripts and participate on a deeper level in section engagement. And then we have our academic editors, who are you, who oversee the peer review process and basically are responsible to a large degree in determining what we should publish or what we shouldn't publish. You can find a list of editorial board members on our website. You can see Jenna at the top here, and Pierre, who couldn't join us today, and Deborah, and then there's section editors, and also underneath academic editors. I believe this gets updated on a weekly basis, so please be reassured that if you can't find your name on here at the moment, it will soon appear there very quickly. So, the academic editor role. Now, academic editors oversee the peer review process from beginning to end, taking responsibility for conducting an initial assessment based on the PLOS Water publication criteria, finding and inviting reviewers, evaluating their feedback, making editorial decisions, and communicating decisions to authors. Our editors also play an active role in the community and are highly engaged as representatives of PLOS Water. Now, we take publication and research ethics very seriously here at PLOS, and we expect our editorial board members to do the same. You can find this code of conduct at our PLOS Editor Centre, which is linked here, and it should have been shared with you as part of the recruitment and onboarding. And you can just click on here. Seems to be stuck. Okay. It is on our in the Editor Centre. You should be able to find all the details for this. It's obviously not letting me click on it for now, so we'll move on. So, getting started in Editorial Manager. We use Editorial Manager as our submission system, and it's provided by a company called Aries. When starting out as a new editor, very first thing that we ask you to do is update your information. So we want to make sure we've got your correct institution and essentially definitely your email or emails if you have more than one, as this is our main way of contacting you with regards to invitations to handle manuscripts. We also would like you to indicate your areas of expertise. This is in the form of classifications and keywords, and this helps us immensely to match manuscripts that come into the system to your expertise. And also setting unavailability dates is quite important as well. for us to know when, obviously, you're not available to handle manuscripts. So again, as part of your welcome pack, we've provided this Academic Editor's Guide to Editorial Manager. It's quite a user-friendly guide, lots of screenshots. The main thing is, obviously, we've just mentioned, if you can indicate your areas of expertise when you log in, this actually helps us immensely. You'll see things like this, where you can select personal classifications from a taxonomy that already exists in PLOS, so you just have to select from existing things that are already in our system. And also, if you could edit your personal keywords, this actually helps to define more clearly potentially things that you're interested in that are not necessarily covered in the taxonomy. And setting and availability dates, as we mentioned before, would be really useful and helpful for us and for you as well, so your inbox doesn't get overloaded with invitations. So here we go. It tells you can set your unavailable dates here, and just set the start date, end date, and reason, and submit that. And then this will show up on our system when we are searching for editors to handle manuscripts. So a general high-level overview on the life of a manuscript. So an author will submit a manuscript to our system. This will undergo an initial technical check, which will check for things like formatting, image visibility, metadata. It will then pass into subscan, where our staff editors will check for things like scope, publication criteria, and publication ethics. Things can be desk rejected at this stage. If they're not desk rejected, they will then pass into editor assignment, where we will try and match them with our academic editors. You can at this point reject the manuscript if you don't think it's suitable for peer review. Otherwise, you would go through the process of soliciting reviewers and then submitting a decision based on their recommendations. It's possible that from from that feedback from the reviewers, you may decide to issue a reject, a revise, or accept decision. For a revised decision, the author will submit a revised manuscript. It will come through another revision technical check, and then ideally it will come back to the academic editor who handled the first submission. So, invitations to handle manuscripts. The key takeaways from this is that your invitations to handle manuscripts will come through email. They'll be sent by PLOS staff, and the subject heading should always say PLOS, or in this case, PLOS Water. And you always have the choice to accept or decline invitations, so this is in your control. So if we take a look at what this looks like. So we have another quick guide here, which again is in your editor resources pack, which you received. So key takeaways: invitations come through email. Most invitations are automated by matches between manuscripts and your profile. So we do have a matching algorithm where the algorithm looks at keywords, classifications, and the manuscript that's been submitted, and it tries to match it with your classifications and keywords. So the more up-to-date these are, the better. And please remember, you always have the choice to accept or decline invitations. So we do have guidance to help you make this decision. But initially, this is what your invitation will look like in the email. So the subject will always be PLOS Water in this case. There'll be a body here, have the manuscript number, the title, and then we have links out to where the email will link out to Editorial Manager. So you have the option to first view the submission to see whether you think it is within your area of expertise. You can click to accept the editor invitation based on that, or you can decline the invitation based on that. So this is within your control. You do not have to accept them if you feel it's not suitable for your expertise. So some guidance here. Consider accepting an invitation when, one, you have the time to handle the submission all the way through. It is in your area of expertise. You have no competing interests. And also, if you feel it's not suitable for peer review, but it's within your area of expertise, please consider accepting the manuscript, and then you can then say it's not suitable for peer review. Consider declining an invitation when you're either too busy, either with external commitments or with other PLOS assignments, it's outside of your area of expertise, or you have any real or perceived competing interests. Okay. So this is our ideal peer review timeline. Obviously, there are factors which may determine that this might not be as accurate as this. So we sort of expect an initial evaluation within 3 days, finding insecure in reviewers 1 to 2 weeks. This can often change, especially if reviewers request extra time to hand in their review. Then 2 to 3 weeks, manuscript with the reviewers, and then a decision based on that. So, Deborah, I'm going to hand back to you for the next few slides.
Yes, so let me share my screen. There we go. So I will have to go to this slide. So over the next 3 slides, I will take you through the actual editorial work and the decisions you will need to make while handling manuscripts. So the first part of this will be the initial evaluation. This is basically the evaluation where you decide whether or not the manuscript can be sent out for external peer review. So what you'll need for this is the PLOS Water publication criteria and, of course, your own subject area expertise. At this point, at the point where you get the manuscript, it will have already been looked at by a staff editor. So if the staff editor notices anything, they may actually leave notes behind for you as well, for you to inform your decision, depending on what it is. So yeah, we have a quick guide for this as well, and I'll go over this really quick. So first of all, the first thing you see here is the time we expect this to take. So of course, as Jackie already mentioned, sometimes things just do take longer, especially if they're very long manuscripts. But please do aim to make this initial assessment within a few days of receiving the manuscript, because we do really want to give timely feedback to the authors. So trying as much as we can to stay within these timelines is really valuable for the authors, for the author experience. So that being said, as I already mentioned, you should assess the manuscript based on the publication criteria. These can be found. There are links in this quick guide that will get you to them, but there's also a short list of our publication criteria here. So most of them are straightforward. One thing that I should point out is that we do not reject based on novels, but sort of the study will have to present the results of original research. That needs to be the statistics, the experiments, the reporting and analysis need to be to a high technical standard. The conclusions need to be supported by the data. Again, one of the criteria here also says it needs to be in an intelligible fashion and written in standard English. Please try to not reject a manuscript based on language concerns by themselves, because they can usually be fixed in a revision. However, if it's completely not understandable, then this may be a reason, but this should really not happen, because a staff editor will have looked at the manuscript before you get it, and they may request copy editing for language before it gets to the academic editor if this is necessary. Okay. So yeah, a staff editor will also usually have checked the ethics in the manuscript before it is passed to the academic editor. So as I mentioned, and it says here, so again, the staff editor may leave notes for you to make a decision. And then after looking at the manuscript and all the other information that was provided with it, you can make a decision on whether to peer review or reject. At this point, you cannot accept the manuscript because every manuscript needs to be reviewed by at least, at the very minimum, one peer reviewer before it can be accepted. Two is better because we do require generally at PLOS for a manuscript to have been evaluated by 2 experts in the field. You are one, so 1 peer reviewer would be the absolute minimum. So at this stage, you can reject if the manuscript clearly doesn't meet the publication criteria. You can reject it without inviting external reviewers. And this is, again, should be the case if there are serious flaws in the science that cannot be addressed in a revision. If the conclusions are unsupported by the data, and also if there are revisions that would have to take place that would take significantly more than the time we usually allot for a revision. In this case, you can change the decision letter to state that you invite the authors to resubmit once they have completed these required revisions. So this would be called an open door reject or an open reject. Okay. In all other situations where it's not fundamentally flawed, please send the paper out for peer review. And so this is the next step of the evaluation, finding and securing reviewers. So spoiler alert, this is going to be the hardest part of being an editor, especially the securing reviewers, and it can often take multiple invitations to secure sufficient reviewers. So, but there are a few tips and tricks we can pass on to help you in the process. So first of all, there's another quick guide, and then that shows you a little bit how to do it. So first of all, as I've already mentioned, all manuscripts need to have at least 1 external reviewer besides yourself. 2 is better, and especially if you have, if you're handling a manuscript that is very interdisciplinary, make sure you have reviewers that can speak to all aspects of the manuscript if possible. So reviewers are invited through Editorial Manager, and Editorial Manager also has some tools to make the process a bit easier for you. So first of all, identifying suitable reviewers. So reviewers should be experts in the field, so they should have published on the topic and have done so relatively recently. They need to have expertise in both the research area and, if possible, also the methodology. They need to be at least at the postdoctoral level and be affiliated with some sort of research institution, but it does not have to be an academic institution. They should, to avoid conflicts of interest, they should not be at the same institution as the authors and should not be listed in the opposed reviewer section. They should also not have recently collaborated with the authors. And please also avoid inviting several reviewers from the same institution. That also applies to your institution. So please do not send a manuscript that you are handling out to your own postdocs. So how do editorial board members usually find reviewers? So the first thing that I'd recommend is approaching researchers you know. because they're often also more likely to accept your invitation. Once you've exhausted that, invite researchers whose work you know. They may also know of your work, and you may be familiar enough with their research to be able to judge whether they'll be a good fit for the manuscript. So if once this sort of has been exhausted as well, you can do a broader search. We do have, so Editorial Manager has a locator tool, the Web of Science Reviewer locator tool that you can use. And again, the guide to Editorial Manager will have instructions on how to use this. You can also use any other database of your choice to identify papers and through those authors in the respective with the respective expertise. One note about the Web of Science Reviewer Locator: it does not vet the reviewers. So even though it gives you suggestions where you can very easily click invite, it does not check whether the sort of the checklist that's here, whether they have published previously with the author, something like that. So you do still need to do your due diligence on those suggestions. So some other tips are listed here. So often early career researchers have more time or are often more willing to review manuscripts. Personalizing the invitation is generally useful. Yeah, you cannot search the Editorial Manager database based on keywords because very few, if any, reviewers in our database actually have keywords listed. So you do need to identify them either through the Web of Science tool or externally, and then search for them in Editorial Manager with their email address. Okay. Yeah. So if you cannot secure a second reviewer, as I've mentioned, we do want the manuscript to be evaluated by 2 experts in the field. So you can act as a reviewer yourself. But if you do, please, we ask that you please sign the review or make it very clear to the author in your decision letter that you acted as a reviewer for transparency. Yeah, if you do think the manuscript needs a statistical review, contact the editorial office, and they will approach statistical reviewers from a pool of stats reviewers that we have. So about inviting reviewers, again, this sort of you can find a step-by-step instruction with screenshots in our Editorial Manager guide. And this is linked again here. One tip: it often takes 8 or so, often more invitations to secure 1 or 2 reviews. So in order to not having to go back into Editorial Manager every other day and inviting another batch of reviewers, what I suggest is finding multiple at the same time, and then once you invite them, you can click either on invite or alternative in Editorial Manager. If you click on alternative or alternate reviewer, what it does is it sets up a queue. So if one invited reviewer declines the invitation or is uninvited because of inaction, it will automatically invite the next person from that queue. So that way you can set up a large batch of potential reviewer invitations without having to log back into Editorial Manager on a regular basis. After you've invited reviewers, I encourage you to check back in periodically to make sure that those that agree to submit a review will actually do so. So Editorial Manager will send automated reminders. But if you're, for example, able, if you have invited people that you know, for example, and you are able to follow up with them if their reviews end up being late, that may be more effective than the automated reminders that Editorial Manager sends. So this could be helpful for speeding the process along. But otherwise, you should be getting an email once the reviews have been completed. So, and that sort of brings us to the last part, and this is assessing the reviews after they have come in and making an editorial decision based on these reviews. So you'll receive the reviews in a somewhat structured form. So there are some structured questions about whether or not it meets the PLOS Waters publication criteria, and whether all data is provided, some questions like this. But there's also, of course, the free text comments that the reviewers provide. There are 4 different decisions, and I'll go through them in a moment. And then you will, after sort of making that decision, you will need to write a decision letter, or at least part of the decision letter. So again, there's a quick guide, and I'll go through that. So again, sort of the time frame we're envisioning. So we usually our default time limit for a reviewer after they accept an invitation to review is 2 weeks. But this can be changed depending on availability and length of the manuscript, and reviewers can request additional time, but usually we aim to have the process completed within 2 or 3 weeks. So let's see. So once you receive the feedback, one thing you need to do is sort of evaluate what is really essential to be fixed and what isn't. So your decision shouldn't be a tallying of votes, as in 2 people say reject and 1 person says revise, and then you make the reject decision. That's not how it works. So you should really assess all the arguments brought forward by the reviewers and make your own decision based on that. So for example, if since we don't reject based on novelty concerns, if reviewers recommend a rejection based on these, right, you can usually disregard this. And yeah, really put this into perspective, sort of determine which things are really crucial that absolutely need to be addressed, which ones are less so. This is give weight to reviewer comments, also based on their expertise, as far as you can judge that. And then sort of first of all, make a call on whether with the feedback that was provided, you are able to make an informed decision. If not, consider either going back to the reviewers for clarification, or if you have to invite additional reviewers. Yeah, so once you have sort of formed an opinion about the manuscript, there are 4 different kinds of decisions you can make, which you will probably know from other journals, either as an author or as an editor, because they're the same, mostly the same everywhere. So there is a major and a minor revision. A major revision is really for if the manuscript is currently not meeting our publication criteria, but it has the potential to do so. But really only if major issues are addressed. So this is a revision, this is a decision that can still lead to a rejection after a round of revision, depending on whether or not the authors are able to address the concerns that have been raised. A minor revision is really if just sort of, it mostly is suitable for publication already, but there are some small things that need to be fixed in order to improve the presentation, for example. Then there's the accept decision. It's very rare for this to happen in the before even one round of revision, but occasionally it happens if it's a really good and well-presented manuscript. Please again note that all manuscripts require at least one round of external peer review before they can be accepted. And also note that if you issue this accept decision, it is sent to production right away. So we cannot, with very few exceptions, cannot make any changes after that. So if there are still minor changes that need to be made, please opt for a minor revision instead. And then there's the reject decision if the manuscript does not meet the publication criteria or requires substantial changes. And same as with the initial evaluation, again, if you think the topic is interesting, but the revisions required are so sort of time intensive potentially, and that it would take significantly longer than the 45 days that are usually allotted for a major revision, consider rejecting but inviting the authors to resubmit. Again, this is an open reject decision. So if you issue a revised decision, as was already mentioned, since we do expect you to handle a manuscript all the way until a final decision, this will go back to the authors and they will resubmit, and the resubmitted revised manuscript will be assigned back to you. We do realize that life happens, and even if you initially thought you may be able to handle a manuscript all the way to acceptance or the rejection, things can come up. If you are not able at any point in the manuscript's life to continue handling it, please let the editorial office know as soon as possible. We really want to avoid having manuscripts in academic editors' accounts for weeks without action because something came up and they aren't able to handle it anymore. So please contact us and we'll reassign the manuscript if needed to another academic editor. So now that you've sort of made the decision on which decision to issue, there's the decision letter. And if you click on submit a decision in Editorial Manager, you will first of all be able to choose the decision and then be brought to the actual decision letter. Part of this is a templated letter already, right? It will already have some sort of information about the decision being made, and it will also already have the peer reviewer comments. Please do not edit or delete any reviewer comments. If you think some things in the reviewer comments do not need to be addressed for the paper to meet the publication criteria, you can put those comments into perspective when editing the actual decision letter, but please do not edit in any way the reviewer comments. So the template of the decision letter will actually have a box that looks like this. So it says, academic editor, please insert your comments here and delete this placeholder when finished. So please do exactly what this instruction says. Put in your own feedback to the authors in there. So this can both should be putting the reviewer feedback into context, as well as potentially adding your own feedback to it. When writing the decision letter, keep the authors in mind. Think about how and what kind of feedback you would like to receive as an author, and give appropriate context, and then provide clear directions. So the clearer the directions are on what actually needs to be addressed and how it needs to be addressed, in order for the manuscript to become publishable, the clearer your guidelines, the more likely it is that the paper will actually be in a good shape once it's resubmitted. So we do occasionally review decisions. So if you get sort of a question on the feedback or the decision you've submitted from our staff editors, sort of do not be surprised. We sort of do look over decisions on a regular basis. Keep in mind that authors can opt in to publish their peer review history, and this includes the decision letter. So if they do so, the decision letter may be published alongside their manuscript, and the reviewers also do get a copy of your decision letter. So, and I think that was sort of the quick rundown of how to handle a manuscript, and I'll hand back to Jackie. Jackie, you're muted.
We appreciate that it probably seems like an awful lot of information. We do have your resources for editors webpage, which again, I believe you were sent the information for during onboarding. And that is here for PLOS Water, and you can see everything pretty much that we've covered today should be in here. So getting started with editorial manager, invitations, evaluation, finding and securing reviewers and making decisions, and also some extra quick guides which may be useful. Also, we're always available for questions and queries. So for general and manuscript queries, you can contact us at water@plos.org, edboard support@plos.org for editorial board role or experience queries. And then any big picture ideas, comments, questions, you can contact Deborah, Jenna, or Pierre, who can't be with us today, but I'm sure he'd be more than happy to help you with any queries. And we'd just like to say again, thank you very much for joining the PLOS Water editorial board.
Yes, thank you in advance for all your hard work.